Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Lovely People webinar. And so this evening, as our guest, we have the lovely Boyan. I'm not even going to attempt to say your surname because I was going to put it in one of the things, and I said to Beck, how do you spell Boyan's surname? And she was like, I went, yeah, exactly, I'll just say Boyan, it's fine.
Yep. It's a very typical EV ending one, Eastern European. No need to pronounce it at all. So I don't even have it on my Facebook. My
well,
Facebook
that's what we kind of thought. You were on Facebook just as Boyan, so we thought that would be enough. That would be fine. You would be famous enough to have the crowds, flocking to the webinar just by Boyan would be fine.
The funny thing is that there's lots of Boyans in Bulgaria, so.
Oh, it's a common name in Bulgaria.
Yes, I have to, by making it my only name on Facebook, I have to stand. And so when someone says Boyan, they will think of me. But it's my goal.
Good plan, good plan.
Yeah.
So we had the pleasure of meeting in person a few weeks ago at the Big Three Principles Conference in London, and it was really nice to hang out with you a little bit, and we did go out and have something to eat and have a right laugh, didn't we, in the evening? So yeah, it's all good. So we have actually met, so I really like it when I have guests on here that I've actually met in person. It's really nice. So that was good. I would really love you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and maybe a little bit about how you ended up being on this webinar this evening.
Cool. Sounds good. Yes, it was really fun to meet you all, and we had a good dinner and a nice pizza at the end.
Yeah, we did.
Well, I work as a non-duality life coach. And so what I help is I help people realize that they are not their thoughts, they're not their feelings, they're not who they think they are, but they are the awareness within which all of this is happening. And this helps people because a lot of us struggle with some kind of emotions, or they fight some part of our experience. And as soon as we realize that it's not the actual thing that we're fighting that's the problem, but the self that is created that fights those things, and that self doesn't exist in reality, like in experience, then it's like the thing that is being fought is fine. It doesn't matter anymore. And it dissolves usually. So that's what I do and how I came here. I know a friend of mine who's in Bulgaria who's called Ivan. And we created an event together a few months ago, and I saw that he was interviewed for this podcast. And I was like, oh, well, can I be interviewed as well?
Hey, if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah.
So cool. So can you tell us a little bit more? I mean, mostly when on these Lovely People webinars, most of the people that I interview are three principles practitioners, or people who have come across a spiritual understanding, kind of looking in this direction are around the three principles. So can you tell us a little bit? You said you're a non-duality teacher, or whatever words you put on it. Can you tell us a little bit more about that for those people that don't quite understand what that might be? I know you kind of touched on it a little bit there, but
I'll kind of try and relate it to the three principles.
Cool.
So first I came across the three principles 6 years ago. Then I went off exploring a lot of other things, like the work of Byron Katie, magic, A Course in Miracles, like a lot of things. And then I came back to the three principles a bit, and then moved on to non-duality. So it's like a bit of a journey. But the way I see it now, from a non-dual perspective, there is only, if it can be called a perspective, there is only consciousness. And that's one of the three principles as well. So I don't see the difference between mind and consciousness. And like I'm open to suggestions. If anyone can show me the boundary between mind and consciousness, then like that would be great. And then to me, it seems that thoughts appear within consciousness. So they are also made of consciousness. Yeah, that's how I would describe it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these things really, I mean, I know when we sat down, when we went out for a meal that night, when we sat down and had a conversation, it didn't really feel as if we were saying anything much different. In fact, it was just these things called words, which are what we have to kind of point people towards, you know, something about themselves and who they are and who they're not, or whatever. It feels words are very tricky to point people in this direction, and I know a lot of the time we kind of point people more towards a feeling or maybe a knowing or something they might have, or something, you know, like that, because words can be quite tricky, can't they? And I think, and it can become quite confusing when people are saying different words on different things. So what would you say to people, you know, if they've kind of come across the 3 principles and they've been looking in that direction, and now obviously what you're saying, you know, if they're getting a little bit confused, what can you say to help us to clarify that a little bit?
Well, I'll take what you said, to listen for a feeling. What is the feeling that they are looking for, or rather, who is even looking for a feeling? So the non-dual teaching would point more towards who is the I that is looking or seeking, and point towards that I am presence. So the first fact of experience is the awareness itself. And when we think as a separate self that we are feeling something, we are actually feeling our very own being. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like I am aware is so when there's a thought or an object of attention or a sound, I am aware of the sound, or the sound is happening within my awareness, and therefore I am the awareness within which it happens.
Okay.
And by staying in that space of awareness, then it can seem like a feeling, but it's just being, really.
So you work with clients. How would you, if you know, what might I come to you? You know, why might I come to speak to you, and how might you help me if I did come to see you?
Well, people come for various reasons, like anxiety, or looking for their purpose, or dealing with a difficult relationship. Yeah, there's all sorts of reasons that got us onto this path in the first place.
Yeah.
And then the way I would help is always by asking, well, who is the I that suffers? And as soon as we try to find that I, or who I am, there is no. So if we can do it now, if we try and find ourselves as a thought, we are obviously not a thought, because thoughts come and go. If we try and find ourselves as a body, we are obviously not the body, because the body is something we are aware of. And so this separate self that is seemingly suffering cannot in experience be found. And therefore there is actually no suffering. Because awareness itself, which is what we are, cannot suffer. It's just open and pure and welcoming and loving.
So what would you say to somebody if, you know, if I was to say to you, well, it seems like I am suffering, you know, I've had a terrible day, something really awful happened to me today, it really feels as if I am suffering, you know, what would you say if we were in this conversation? Do you want pointing me in that direction? And then I say that, what would you?
Are you here now? I would ask you. If you're here now, and from the present experience, is there even such a thing as a day? Because even the fact of time is itself a mind-made concept. We have to think about the past to remember something that happened, but we don't need to. So in the now, in the actual presence of being, there is no, you are not suffering.
So it's about bringing people into this present moment, into this moment now.
For example, yeah, and since everything in our experience brings us back to the now, so every thought comes from consciousness itself and is made of consciousness. Every sound appears and disappears within our awareness or our self. Every sensation appears and disappears within this space. So every single thing in experience points us back to that.
Shall we see if anyone who is here has got any questions? If there's anything anyone would like to, any questions anyone would like to ask, because it's always good. I always forget to bring people into the conversation, so I'll do them in tonight. Not.
Sure, with pleasure.
So you can, if anyone has got a question, you can unmute yourself, or you can put your hand up and I can unmute you. Okay. Have you unmute?
Hey.
Hi, Terry.
Hi. I'm wondering, Boyan, if you could share some personal experiences around your own bouts or moments of confusion and suffering, and how your understanding has helped you through those.
Yeah. So before understanding all of this, I used to have a lot of practices, like stopping for 5 minutes and letting go of thoughts, feelings, sensations, and slowly kind of detaching myself from the world, and then coming back with more awareness. But now even that is not necessary, because as soon as I think or I find myself suffering, I ask myself, well, who is it that is suffering, or am I really suffering? And just by challenging that very fact of I think I am who I am not, brings me back to clarity or knowing.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about your experience of who you truly are, and that peaceful place, that knowing place. I guess what I'm trying to get to here is, for people who have no experience around the non-dual understanding, the knowing of the truth of who we are, it can appear to be a very big leap from being caught up in your day-to-day activity and just caught up, and all is well.
So what happens, like when I ask myself, who am I? Immediately there's like a big space between the suffering and the awareness. So it's like suddenly the awareness comes into full view, and I realize I am aware that I think I am suffering. So maybe I'm aware of a thought I'm suffering, and a feeling that manifests that thought into my body. But as soon as I realize that this feeling or this thought doesn't actually affect me in any way, then I don't need to change it. It is what it is. Yeah, and again, with people, I go through this process of, you are not your body, you are not your thoughts, you are not your feelings. So what are you? And no thought can actually give the answer to who we are, because thoughts come from this space.
So I've had, thank you, Terry, and thank you, Boyan.
Yeah.
Somebody has messaged and said, what about people dealing with really extreme suffering, such as coping with real disaster like famine or death? How can saying we don't suffer help somebody in that position?
Well, no one can. This will sound arrogant or maybe even stupid or naive to some, but no one can suffer from death, because death is like a 1 second experience and awareness. There is no mind to be aware then of death, so there is no suffering. But I guess they're referring to the pain before dying, and
The thought of dying.
yeah, or the fear of that. And again, it's a thought-based fear. If the actual experience of death is not painful, then why would we pretend that it is or think about it so much?
I suppose a little bit like Terry was saying, I think for some people, like you described that your journey, you kind of came across the principles and then you looked at a lot of other things, and then you kind of had, you saw something around non-duality, and it can seem like a huge leap, to go from kind of saying things like that, we don't suffer from death, that most people walking around on the street these days would kind of like, what are you talking, what are you talking about? It is quite a leap. And yeah, they've kind of said, and what about the grief of the loss of someone, someone you love? What about grief when somebody that you love dies? And I mean, when you're speaking, I can absolutely see that when I came across the principles, those were the kind of things that I began to see, that all of those things were thought, they were all, when we're not thinking about those things, we don't suffer, even when we are right in the midst of whatever it is that is going on. I can remember when my granddad died, and it was a long time ago. It was when I was 16, and I can remember having conversations with my brothers and sisters on the day that he died and being perfectly okay, and then going into a place of it feeling like the end of the world, and I didn't know how I was going to carry on with my life, and then going into a place of being okay with what had happened, having all sorts of experiences. And I hadn't realized that I'd had such, so many different experiences. I hadn't, when we talk about it, and even afterwards, I kind of made it this one big thing. My granddad died and I was sad. I know I was really upset. I didn't and it was only when I came across the principles and I was thinking about it and people was kind of talking about experiences, and I realized I could remember the day, and I can remember kind of different things happening, and realizing that I'd had a variety of experiences around that. And I think one of the things that you were saying about being curious is kind of like, well, what's that about? A variety of experiences? What does that even mean? So I don't know, maybe expand a little bit on.
I think it's very important here to say, because when I talk about non-duality, a lot of people might think, well, this is spiritual bypassing, as they call it. But it's actually the opposite. So I'm not suggesting to not experience something. Actually, I'm suggesting to fully go into any experience and embrace it as fully as possible. And that's how, by maintaining the awareness that you are one with the experience, but at the same time you are aware of the experience, and therefore it has no impact on consciousness or on awareness itself.
So do you think that when Sid Banks was talking about, and when he said if people learned not to be afraid of their own experience, do you think this is what he, what he was pointing towards, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. I think in order to not be afraid of experience, you need to know yourself fully. Because if you don't know, if you think that experience affects you in any way, then you see some experiences as fearful and others as pleasurable or whatever. So knowing that no experience can affect your essence, then you can experience anything.
I mean, everything that you're saying, it doesn't sound to me, when I have a three principles conversation, it doesn't feel to me as if I am pointing people to anything much different to that at all. I would kind of say from this, and maybe it can exactly the same. It can feel as if you're kind of saying to people, so it doesn't matter if these things happen. It doesn't matter, or if people die, don't worry about it, you're not suffering. And yet it is kind of a deeper knowing of the truth of who we are. To me, this feels as if my experience has been, as I have seen that there is a deeper part of me, there is something here that can't suffer or can't change or can't be, when the principles point us towards resilience that we've got or something like that, to me it feels as if they're pointing us towards this something about us that doesn't, that isn't affected when terrible things happen, doesn't change, nothing happens. And it for me personally, it feels like my human experience that I still appear to have. It feels like I have. It feels like we met and went out for pizza. It feels like we went to a conference and had some laughs and fun. It feels like I have a human experience. And it seems to me that my human experience is easier from a deeper knowing of who I am. Would you say that's kind of what we're pointing to here? Would you say something different around that? What would be?
Yeah, I think fundamentally all religions, teachings, and even non-teachings and everyday experiences like drinking a beer point us back to this space. I think what I would say differently is that the three principles point the people towards their true nature, whereas non-duality says you are your true nature and there is no human experience, or there is no person having experiences. It's just awareness experiencing itself. And yeah, it's a big difference, because on the one hand you assume the existence of a separate self that then has to find something, and on the other hand, in non-duality you just say you are everything already. There's nothing to find.
I'm kind of trying to, I don't think that I would, it doesn't feel to me like there is any difference. It literally feels like it feels like words. It's, like different. This afternoon, me and Beck were having a conversation and we were talking, I can't remember, she called herself, she kind of said, I like exploring. I like, to explore things. And I said, I like to get curious. And then we were kind of, are we actually saying anything different? She's calling herself an explorer. I'm saying I'm curious. And we're kind of saying, if we actually are we actually saying anything any different? And to me it doesn't seem, and maybe this is my, I don't know, maybe there's something I'm missing here, but to me it doesn't feel as if anything, a little bit like Terry was saying earlier, it seems like quite a jump for somebody to go to, like, you don't exist. That feels like quite a huge jump to kind of take. And yeah. And it feels as if we exist, doesn't it? Do you actually have an experience of feeling like Boyan does not exist?
Well, yes, as in, like, let's look into it. When you say Boyan, what do you mean?
The person who's on my screen looking at me there, that I'm having a conversation.
Okay, and what is a person?
I am a person, you are a person.
So it's not only the body, because we have also thoughts and feelings, images. We can think of the future and all of that. So who is the one having the thoughts or feeling the body?
Awareness is definitely, having the thoughts. There is something that is aware of what is going on. There is something that
Yeah. And then if there's a thought that comes that's like, I'm curious, or I am an explorer, and we actually try and find, well, who is the I that is curious? It's just that thought that seemingly creates an image of an I, but that I is still awareness.
Yeah. But it still feels, I mean, I can absolutely see it. It still appears, it feels as if I have a separate experience from Beck and from you and from, the people that are on the screen. It feels as if I have a separate experience. It doesn't feel,
Yeah. I think that's what the three principles say when they say universal mind. It's just that we share the same mind, and it experiences itself differently through each of us.
Yeah. So it feels as if there is, a little bit like, when I go to sleep and I have a dream and I dream that there are other people there. It doesn't feel as if I am being all of those people. It feels as if they are separate entities to me. So it's actually, that feels as if it is my experience, that there are different people going on there. So how would you say, like, for me personally, when I go about my life, it feels as if coming across this understanding and realizing there is something more to, realizing that I'm not my body, realizing that definitely, that awareness, definitely, I would say there's more of an awareness than, I don't believe that all there is to me is my body. I don't believe that. It doesn't appear like that. And yet it feels as if my experience is an easier experience. It feels like it's a lighter experience. It feels like more joyful for the most part. And that it appears that, so it seems that coming across this understanding has changed things for me. It feels like, my life is different. But it still feels like I go out into, there is a me going out into the world and doing things. It still feels, I like that. I quite like that experience. I
Awesome.
enjoy having that experience.
Yeah, why not? I just want to go back to the dream thing because it's super cool. So when we dream at night, each of us kind of projects their own little dream world. And then we even interact with other like friends or imaginary people in that dream world. And then we wake up and we are back here. So what happens here is the same thing. All of these people in the dream happen within one mind, within my mind or your mind or whatever. So when I dream, you don't see what I dream. When you dream, I don't know what you dream. And when we come here, we have a shared experience. So it's like the same thing happens just on a larger scale. So it's the same one mind that creates each of us and then makes us interact in this way. Yeah.
So how is it helpful? Like you said, if people come to speak to you and they're suffering, and like the question on here, what if we're suffering in this way, how is it? How do you find? What have you seen in people that you have helped? What is helpful to people around suffering from depression and getting into struggles and daily life?
Yeah. Well, I'll answer your two questions together.
Cool.
So you said that it feels like life is easier and lighter, and of course it would be, because a lot of people they see themselves in the mirror and then they say, well, I have a big nose, or I'm too fat or too skinny or whatever, and they identify directly with the body. So it's like I and the body are one. And when that's the case, it's like suddenly all that you have to care about is the body, and all that you do is about the body. But in actual fact, the body is just a small, tiny part of who we really are. And so the more you see that, the more the body becomes like just a means of transport or communication. And then of course it's easier because you feel lighter and you know yourself better. And and how it helps is exactly in that way, when people realize, wait, I am so much more than the body, I'm so much bigger than anything I ever thought I was. Then suddenly it's like, well, it doesn't even matter what I do, or life just becomes a play, a temporary field of experiences coming in and out of awareness.
Yeah. And to me, what it kind of started to feel like was, I actually, I like this human experience. I actually really enjoy. I used to absolutely detest my human experience. I was very scared of it. I really didn't like it. I really did not like being me at all. And yet it seems that, in a nutshell, the way that I would describe, my understanding what happened was, I came across the principles. I was in a mess. Came across the principles and I thought, oh my gosh, here is something that can really help me. And then this can really help, my family, people close to me. Oh my gosh, this can really help everybody in the world. And then I kind of had this, there aren't other people who need help. I don't need help. And then strangely, as I saw that gave me the best human experience I've ever had. That's kind of what, and I suppose that's the only sort of bit. It feels to me as if my human experience is rich, nice. I like it. I like having this experience. But that's kind of what it actually felt like. The full circle for me came back to realizing that there's nothing riding on this. You know, I'm sat here now in my garden and looking out, and you know, there's gorgeous flowers. There's a little bit of a breeze here. These beautiful, I don't even know what they are in the hedge. Not a flower person really, but they're absolutely beautiful. And like, that experience of seeing those it's just lovely, and I love that I have, and it feels like I am a human being having that experience. That's what it feels like to me, and I like it.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I think as soon as you love something, then there is no distance between you and what you love. It's like you are so close together that's why it's so beautiful.
Shall we open it up again and see if anyone else has got any questions, or anyone would like, any comments, any other questions, or anything that anyone would like to ask? I'm enjoying myself here. It's a fun conversation. So if anyone, you can either unmute yourself or make me aware that you want to be unmuted, and I will unmute you. But if anyone would like to add anything, ask any questions, make any comments, please join us. You've quieted everybody's minds, and they're all
it's all clear.
Yeah, it just kind of, one of the things that didn't make any sense to me was that in the principles community, there seems to kind of just be this ridiculous divide that everyone's kind of seeing, we're pointing to something completely different, and I have yet to see anything that you have said that feels anything different. Maybe there are different words, and maybe I point to it in a slightly different way, but I'm yet to find something that you are saying that contradicts with anything that anyone that I have ever heard that speaks about the principles says. And so in a way, that's kind of why I was curious to have this conversation with you, because I know, in a lot of the posts, and Facebook posts are incredibly, it's not a great place to have this conversation, because
yes.
One of the things that I have noticed very much, and actually when we were at the conference, I was in a talk that was being given by Michael Neal, and Michael Neal said, I don't get into these conversations on Facebook because pretty much what we're pointing to here is about a feeling, and it is incredibly difficult to know whether you're in the same feeling or kind of have that and I know, like, when we met, some of the times when I've watched non-duality and principles people, it feels like there's this huge conflict and argument going on, and yet when we met and we hung out together at the conference, it didn't feel to me then, we got on great. We had a lovely time. It was great. Didn't feel to me like there was any conflict with these two things. And nothing, within this conversation here has felt that way to me, interestingly. So.
I think fundamentally the principles are saying there's only three principles. There's like mind, consciousness, and thought. It doesn't in any way include persons, a world, different experiences, suffering. It just says there's mind, consciousness, and thought. That's it. And then all of these things create the experience of a person in a world that creates and does things.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of also, when we talk about the three principles in that way, it's even then kind of, it's more said, it's three ways of talking about one thing. And it's like, in a way, earlier on you were kind of saying thoughts arise within awareness, and you said all there is consciousness. So what's awareness? Consciousness. What's thoughts? Consciousness. So what is mind, thought, and consciousness? It's three ways of talking about one thing. So again, exactly. That doesn't appear to me that it's words and how we say it, maybe, and maybe you might say something more gently depending on the person who is in front of you. It might be that you would point them. Sometimes if somebody's in front of me and they're crying and they're upset, I wouldn't say anything about anything. You just kind of hug them and say, sometimes. And so
Yeah, I would. I would definitely not say to someone crying, "You're not suffering," and you're pretending. Like, no, that doesn't work.
So to me, it look, yeah, are we explorers? Are we people who are curious? To me, it's different words pointing to the exact same thing, and it doesn't feel as if there is any conflict between. It doesn't feel as if we're pointing towards anything any different. Nothing you have said here seems to me, in all the webinars that I've done with all the principals, facilitators, in various whatever reason they've come across, it doesn't feel to me as if you are saying anything different.
Yeah.
Cool. So I don't know.
The only thing I would say is that separate self thing.
Yes.
So yeah, but we already discussed it.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of like, what does that exactly? What does it mean, and how much? I think when we kind of see through, when we begin to see that we are not our body, or we're not, but it almost feels to me like the experience I'm having, I suppose, because of language and because of the fact that we do communicate, it's easier to speak in those ways. When you hang out with people, when you do, it's easier to kind of say, oh, I think this and this is happening to me. It's an easier way to communicate.
Yeah, of course. And I had this conversation with someone else, like, what would the world look like if everyone understood this non-duality? Or the three principles? And I think we would still need passports and some forms of boundaries, and maybe even countries, just to be able to point to what we want to point the other to. Because if there's no words, then we cannot actually interact or say anything. So yeah, that makes sense. But it makes sense as long as there is the awareness that it's a concession. So if I say Bulgaria, and I know that there is no actual, if we look at the planet as a whole, there are no boundaries between Bulgaria and other countries. If I know that as I'm saying Bulgaria, then that's one thing. If I think that Bulgaria is a really existing place in the world, and then that can create conflict between Bulgaria and France and whatever. But,
yeah, and it is. And I said, during this week, I heard somebody talking about something called first principle thinking, and I'd never heard of that. Didn't know what it was, and it's nothing to do with the three principles as such. It's just because the word is the same.
right.
And that kind of, it's pointing towards a starting point.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to, this is this same conversation again. If we get curious about what is the starting point, and if we are starting from the place where the world is just a whole, then we can talk about Bulgaria and England and France and what have you, so long as we know where our starting point is. And it is
exactly
about where the starting point is. And to me, it appears that the principles are pointing us towards the starting point is that there is something deeper to us. It does appear that there's this body here. It appears to me that Bulgaria is on a map and England's on a map, but the starting point is that there's just a whole. And it feels that it's the same thing. The starting point here is that there's just one whole. But then it feels like there's a Debra. It feels like there's a Boyan. It feels like there's a Beck and a Lou and a Terry and, all these lovely people with us. And so it's easier to communicate from that perspective, generally speaking, with that deeper understanding of the truth of who we are.
Yeah, exactly. And once I saw this for myself, everything became funny to me, because people actually live as though all of these concepts that we make to communicate better or to know what we're pointing to are very real.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's why I started the Divine Humor YouTube channel, and I started making like videos pointing them. Well, no, it's not like this.
Mm, mm, mm. And I think that to the best of our ability, that's kind of what we're about, aren't we? Saying, okay, question your thinking, question what it is that you believe to be the starting point. Maybe there's something before that, maybe you can go back. And I guess from my perspective, I see any slight steps we take back, and sometimes people do take the jump from here to right the way back, and sometimes people like to be edged very slowly back, and it can be quite a jump for some of us to go, whoa, wait a minute, you're telling me I don't exist? There's no boundaries anywhere. It's quite a scary thing initially when it's first suggested to us.
Yeah, I mean, it took me 8 or 9 years to finally come to this. But I think it's called the direct path simply because it's pointing directly to the source of all experience. And yeah, it's not for everyone, because it's for some people it may be too direct. And I don't think actually anyone comes to non-duality as the first thing ever. Like they probably explore other things first, and then they arrive at non-duality.
And all of it is kind of words that are just trying their best to point us in the direction of a deeper truth of who we are. Yeah. Okay, cool. So I am aware again, I just love to talk. So, and I'm wondering if anyone, would like to join in, if anyone has got any questions or comments about what it is we've been sharing here, if anything's making sense or not making sense, it would be great to hear from you guys. Oh, Terry again. Hi, Terry.
I'll go ahead and jump in, waiting for somebody else to jump in.
No, jump.
One thing I hear that Rupert Spira says a lot is, and maybe part of the reason it might be a reach for some people to go from I'm suffering to it's impossible to suffer, or who I am can't suffer, is because being able to understand or experience the truth of who we are, that I know that Boyan is pointing to, you can't do it through your regular intellectual thinking. You can't do it through the thinking that got you to the suffering, because it can't see what's being talked about. It's a bigger view that isn't. You can't intellectualize it.
Yeah.
So that's why it's hard to talk about it, because as soon as you put it into words, you're starting to put it into intellect and trying to work with the mind, the thinking mind, to understand something that's beyond the thinking mind. And so it can be really confounding. And that's why it seems to me that, at least in my own experience, when I'm knowing that experientially, what you're pointing at, Boyan, it's not comparable to anything that comes up in thinking. It's not something that can be compartmentalized or can be, shown. It's like talking about the present moment, and this being all there is. You can't conceptualize that. You can see that perhaps it's true that I experience the past and future always in this moment when I'm thinking about it. You can't literally go into the past and experience it, or into the future and experience it. We're always experiencing it now in our thinking about it.
Yeah.
So it's always interesting to talk about this understanding, because you're always just pointing at something that can't really be talked about.
Yeah.
An experience that can't be understood through our normal way of processing experience.
And it's part of the game of mind to make it very complex, exactly because it cannot understand it.
Exactly.
I will never get this. This is too hard. What are they talking about? I don't exist. Yes, I exist. Here I am.
This is spiritual bypass.
Yeah,
let's get down to the bottom of this.
Yeah, but actually, it's yeah, it's so obvious that that's what makes it so complicated in a funny way. We cannot have a thought without it. We cannot experience anything without it. And so it's so, we are trying to look with something which is an effect of what we're pointing towards for what we're pointing towards, and it doesn't work. You cannot. It's like having glasses on and trying to see with the glasses themselves or things. It's not. It's the eyes that see, not the glasses. Yeah.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you.
Hi.
Fiona has. Hello. You're muted.
Hang on. I think you're unmuted now. Go.
Hello.
Hi.
I was going to say that, like Boyan, I'm following non-duality. And it seems to me that it's not that the suffering isn't there. It's actually that our suffering, it depends when you're looking at suffering. I mean, there's different ways of thinking about suffering. You could be suffering because you don't like something and you want it to be different. And that's very in the head kind of suffering. And then there's a suffering that comes with like pain. But you can't tell someone who has pain, there is no pain, because there's pain. If somebody is suffering as a result of something that they want to be different, then that's slightly different. That it's not that there is no suffering, it's simply that our experience of that suffering is different when we hold still. So when we hold still, it gives us that opportunity to what in the principles we always called self-correcting, back to what we now call true nature, but that we may well have called mind or thought, or the whole of mind, consciousness and thought. And in that we resist what is less. And in resisting what is less, i.e. resisting the pain less, oh my God, I can't cope, it's really painful. Or in the like, I don't want to go to work, but I have to go to work. If we don't resist it, we no longer suffer. Because yesterday I went for the most, and I'm going to write a post about this, but I haven't done it yet. But yesterday I went for the most amazing walk, which was just a chance. And literally, nature, the world came to me because I had nothing else going on. I wasn't looking for anything. There was no seeking going on. There was just simply being in the moment. And things came to me that had I been thinking about something else or worrying about something else or resisting anything or seeking anything, I would have missed. I spent 15 minutes staring into the eyes of a deer that was just there between the undergrowth, really close to me. And I stood still and it stood still and we looked at each other. Neither of us moved until somebody else came down the path who had a dog that was ahead of him, and the deer decided to run at the dog. But it was just that wouldn't have happened if I'd had head full of thinking, or I was seeking something else, or there's something about that seeking. Anyway, it was a long walk. I'd taken no food with me. I had limited water supplies, and I had the most cracking headache. But do you think I felt that headache? No. Because there was all this magic going on around me. So even though the pain was there, I only noticed it in moments when I kind of looked for it, in a sense.
Yeah.
And in those other moments, I carried on having this amazing time, irrespective of the fact that my head was clanging like a bell. Probably because I hadn't eaten anything and I had very limited supplies of water. So the suffer, I did not suffer despite the fact that I came home and I ate and I took painkillers because it was a bit on the hard going side, or eventually I took painkillers. I drank loads of water first, but that didn't seem to work. And I didn't need to suffer because I understood that just by noticing it, for me, it's really about the articulation of non-duality is very much about that noticing. So it's not even that I have to be okay with it. I can be not okay with it, that's fine. But the suffering dissipates when I just notice it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's good.
Does that help anyone? I don't know. That's my little story.
Yeah, it clarifies it, and I think it's a very important point, because that's when I say there is no suffering, I'm not saying there is no pain. I'm saying what Fiona just said, that there is no one to label it as suffering. So there is a sensation still there, but it's not painful, it's not suffering, it's just
it might be experience. It might be painful, but I'm just noticing it.
Yeah, as in not painful, as in not, you wouldn't label it as painful, although it would feel painful. Yeah.
But then the fact that it's there sometimes and not others suggests that, is it really there? Or is it those moments when true nature steps into the eyes of a separate being, which has a label called Fiona, notices that this body that's got a label called Fiona has a headache going on? Because ultimately there are times when I, the bigger I, is there experiencing nature in an amazing situation which doesn't freak a deer out. and that person didn't have a headache, or that whatever I is, I, the awareness, didn't have a headache,
Yeah, I love it. Rupert Spira says that the separate self is not the actual painful sensation, but it's the distance between awareness and the sensation. And as soon as that distance is gone, then there is no more labeling of suffering or pain.
A fascinating conversation. Thank you, Fiona. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to hear from you. I'm kind of aware that as always happens, we've run out of time pretty much. So Boyan, first of all, if anyone would like to carry on this conversation with you, can you tell us, where we can find out more about you, how we could get hold of you, anything like that, in case anyone is interested?
Yep. So the best place is my website, which is www.boyan.com. Yeah.
And you did say you're on Facebook as just Boyan?
Yes. They can find me on Facebook through my website, and I'm also active on Twitter, Instagram, send out a newsletter. I do meditations in London and online webinars. Yeah. So they can find out.
Cool. And if anyone is looking for Boyan and can't find him but knows where I am, if you ask me, I can point you in his direction. So it was really, really good. It was a really fun conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yes, same.
Beck, what am I supposed to share? I don't do this bit very well.
Just find it, the organised bit.
Yeah.
So, two things we wanted to share are, we have a challenge that's starting on the 22nd of July, a free 5-day challenge, exploring or being curious about this under the topic of self-love. So that's going to be an interesting one. You can find out more about that from us if you just want to connect on Facebook or YouTube. And we were going to say we won't be having another Lovely People webinar in this format. This is actually our last. I realised that 5 minutes in, I was like, our last Lovely People webinar in this format.
We are doing something else though, so it's fine.
Yes. You can't get rid of us that easily. I think that's it. We've run out of no.
There are no people, so how can we... That's it. It's the end.
So from next month we're going to be doing a weekly live YouTube show, and we'll be inviting some guests to join us on that. We will be putting a poll out on Facebook, maybe tomorrow, maybe Friday, to see what times people would like us to do that, and we're going to go with the majority vote. So look out for that on Facebook, and then look out for our YouTube shows that we'll be starting hopefully next Wednesday, if we can make the technology work.
What are they going to be called? Do we know?
I don't think we've got a name yet. We're fairly visible, so you'll find them. I think that was it for tonight.
Cool. Well, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Boyan, for being our guest. It was I really enjoyed that conversation. It was really, really good, and it was really lovely to see everybody. And yeah, just kind of we're always visible everywhere, and I'm sure you can find Boyan if you want to carry on this conversation. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for being here with us tonight. It was really
Thank you for having me. Yes, it was really
a pleasure. You're officially a lovely person.
Thank you. You're hilarious.
A lovely non-person and
Yes.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.